All right.
So I think we're good. Without further ado, Dave, I'll kick it off with you.
Well, thanks, Matt. Good to see everybody today. Thanks for joining in. Glad to be with you. Obviously, continue, new things, very fluid environment, but the announcement of a couple days ago was obviously paramount as things continue to roll out, but very difficult decision. Quite frankly, gut-wrenching for me as you go through it and you have to pull back and potentially take what opportunities away from student athletes and coaches, impact communities and fans. The passion for the sports is great. And so it was very, very difficult as we kind of navigate and move down those roads. But I will say I'm very supportive of the decision. We talk a lot about why we do things, why we do what we do in college athletics. And, really number one for all of us is the health, the safety, the well-being of our students, our student athletes. And that's what this decision was made with. And we'll continue to move forward, to plan forward so that when we do have these opportunities to compete and to be together again, we'll be ready for that. But like all of society, quite frankly, all of the world, we almost don't know what's coming next day. And that's very difficult. I think I've said it with this group. Athletics, coaches, athletes, our team, our staff, we want certainty. We want to know what the goal is. We want to see where we're going. And that's been very challenging in this environment when there's just so much uncertainty and unknown. And when you get back to health and safety and well-being and you don't have certainty, I think that makes your decision-making process clearer. And you have to make sure that you are processing it accordingly and then making the best decision possible for those individuals that are involved in our activities and in our programs. So I know we got a lot of landscape to cover. That's just some general feelings and some general comments to kind of kick things off. So I'm open to having a good, robust conversation this morning, everyone. Matt, I guess.
All right. So first question will be from Justin Spears with the Arizona Daily Star.
Hi, good to see you, Dave. Now, I'm wondering, what is your ideal plan for football in the spring? What are you hoping to see out of the season? That way, maybe it doesn't offset the 2021 season.
Yeah, obviously the delay, the postponement of our fall sports, really all of our competitions during the fall period until the new year is challenging because we need to build new models on how we can go forward in the winter and springtime to complete those seasons. I'm a strong advocate of playing football and developing an acceptable and an approved model for football in the spring. Clearly understand there's lots of complications and issues that surround that, but I believe that we can come together nationally and pull some really good plans and develop something that allows our student athletes to play, and hopefully we can have people be engaged in the games and come and watch them. Now, I believe it's also a 2-year or 2-season exercise. We've got to look at the spring and how that impacts the fall and then that middle part, the summer. It's certainly not traditional. We won't really have a spring football, and then how quickly will you come back in the summer, and then how would you activate a season in the fall? So it's not just while we're looking at spring and how do we pivot quickly and put a plan together for playing games, but I think we've got to think long on this for to the future, because it does impact some different periods of both training, practicing, and future games, future seasons next fall.
All right. Second question was Jason Shear.
Hey, Dave, I'm just curious. It looks like other conferences are at least going to try to play. Is there a ramification, you think, for maybe like 2 conferences sitting out and 3 conferences playing? Are you worried about how that might look, or how do you kind of deal with that whole situation?
Yeah. Hey, Jason, a great question. While we don't have everyone, doing exactly the same thing, I think we've got to wait it out. We've got to see where this ultimately does land. I go back to our decision. We're we understand what we're doing and what we have ahead of us now. Clearly, we've got to see what other conferences do and how games are played. That will impact the models. But I know we're working forward to how do we put something together for our programs in the Pac-12 to participate in the spring.
Next question will be from Michael Lev, Arizona Daily Star.
Hi, Dave. My first question is about myocarditis, which seems to have been a big factor, an increasingly big factor in this whole thing. How big a deal was that when that information was presented to you guys? And are you aware of any instances of Pac-12 athletes showing this condition?
I'm not aware of any incidences. I'm not aware of any medical incidences in our league with that. Again, I know it's been a couple of days here, and the decision's really centered around three big issues: testing, the presence of the virus as it continues to be there. So obviously we can continue to transmit or contract the virus, and then the cardiac issues that have come forward. Those all together, did not create the best atmosphere. If you don't have an abundance of testing to be able to identify and then separate people, if you're concerned about the disease and the transmittable, the ability for it to spread potentially, and then these other additional conditions that could be created, so to speak, or some potential damage that we don't have an abundance of knowledge of, all of those together, caused us to pause, say, we've got to listen, we've got to learn some more, and we think it's best that we wait. And that's in the best interest of our student athletes. And quite frankly, our coaches who are out there and our support staff who are out there. There's a large number of people, yes, in a football program, but across the entire athletics program that are impacted by that.
What do you and other league leaders hope will change between now and January?
Well, we think obviously, the pause and the delay will allow for testing. And when we talk about testing, I want to be clear, at Arizona, we have a gold star testing program. What we're doing here is the finest in the country, I believe. Our ability to test and treat and trace and do all the things, and I think we've proven that through the summer months, how effective that is. This is about testing so that we know people can go into high intensity competition, high intensity practicing, high contact, zone, so that we know. So you need that almost daily. So we need more testing that it has quick, rapid results and a high specificity percentage. We've got to have that, obviously. So we need more abundance. We need of those tests so that we can do that. And I think by waiting, we believe we can get closer to that. And in that time, we hope that the virus can be controlled, or that we'll see some trends in the virus itself. And then also we'll learn more about these cardiac issues or any other things that we don't really know about at this point. We'll have a better handle on those going forward into a spring season.
Okay, next question, Bruce Pascoe, Arizona Daily Star.
Unmute there. Sorry. Thanks, Dave, for doing this. I was wondering, I know it's early and really hypothetical at this point, but Dave, the last EADA numbers you had, 43.3 million for football, and I'm wondering, at least at this point, do you have a ballpark on if there's no football, what does that number go down to, and if you have spring football, what could it be? And as part of that, I'm wondering if you've had any at least preliminary conversations with Pac-12 networks, Fox, ESPN, et cetera, on how they might work with you as far as that.
Well, as part of the conversation, I'll kind of try to flip it a little bit here, Bruce. Part of the conversation, obviously, along the way, we've had an abundance of conversations with our own network, with our network partners from a television standpoint about how this impacts them, and then how going forward we could develop a model that would be inclusive of them so that we can continue to drive revenues through the TV packages. That's very important to not only football, but our entire athletic operations. Without football, we're estimating, again, these are very ballpark numbers. It's such a fluid situation. You don't know how much revenues will truly be realized if we have a season in the spring or not. But, without football, we're looking at a $60 to $65 million impact revenue loss for our athletic department.
So that's substantially more than you reported for football alone. Does that mean you're going to lose Wildcat Club contributions, et cetera? Or how do you get to that figure?
Yeah, I think, again, Bruce, let's be clear, this is somewhat fluid. We look at everything, how that impacts all of our revenue streams through the athletics program. Obviously, it's tickets, it's contributions, direct revenue from the conference, additional sponsorship and marketing arrangements and agreements, our IMG deal, all of those packaged together. I just can't throw a dart and get the number exactly, but we are looking and modeling if we don't have football, if it is canceled completely, that we would see a revenue loss of between $60 and $65 million.
Okay. And one final follow-up there. If there is spring football in any form, does that offset it by, 5, 10, 15 million, something like that? Or who knows? We
don't know. There would be an offset, and that is certainly a benefit to a spring season, but it's not the driving force. We first and foremost want to make sure that we can build a model that is appropriate for our student athletes. But that could be offset, and there is support and interest in the spring from our television partners and our marketing partners to continue.
Thanks.
All right. Next question will be Daniel Grossman, Script National News.
Hey there, Dave. So Trevor Lawrence came out a few days ago talking about how, he thinks players would be safest within their school setting, not only because of, related to COVID, but because a lot might come from underprivileged communities where there might be, other dangers, safety concerns for them and their families. When it comes to this, what is the thought process behind you guys at an upper management level? Have you heard concerns from players about, not being able to play football and having to, maybe remain home or elsewhere that's not within the athletic department bubble?
Well, let me be clear. I don't know if I was clear on that. Our athletic program, we are re-entering all of our student athletes. We continue to provide training, conditioning, support services for all of our student athletes. We are re-entering, and our student athletes are going to class, doing those things as they start in next week. So our environment remains in place. We believe, as I touched on just a moment ago, we have an incredibly safe environment with the protocols, the systems we've put in place, the medical treatment and attention that we put onto this, the plan across our campus. We believe it is a very safe environment. So, again, the feedback from our student athletes is they feel very safe and want to be here. And so we will continue to allow that to happen and support them to the fullest. If there are student athletes that, and again, that's completely voluntary and a personal decision, those that may not want to be in the environment, that is perfectly within their purview. They can move off campus. They can go home. They can go to an environment that they think they are more comfortable in and continue certainly their education online in the ways that we've outlined, a number of different ways for the students to engage academically. So, we want to, again, we want them to come to campus. We will provide a very safe and appropriate environment for them.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on here. Steve Rivera, you are next up with the question.
Dave, pardon me if this repeats Daniel's question, but my question originally would be, you've had the kids or the student athletes in a semi-bubble, a number of them since last month or so. The student body will be back here pretty soon. What's your advice to the student athletes to mingle or not mingle with the general public? what not to do. And maybe if they're even thinking that, well, there's no football, what do we have to lose? We can be kind of students again and kind of go out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've talked individually to every one of our teams as the decision came down and, things pivoted a little bit. So we've obviously talked about the new environment that exists and the lack of competition that will happen in the fall. But at the same time, I've been very clear, along with our medical team, about all of our responsibility in our community, on our campus community and in the greater community, to follow the protocols, to be safe, that this is bigger than yourself. And we've tried to deliver that message to our student athletes. I think, again, our football student athletes who have been here and our support staff and coaches have done an excellent job in doing that. We talk about masking, keeping a face covering on at all times, physical distancing. That's part of our reentry plan and part of our operational plan, and sanitizing, washing your hands, and, all of those things are critically important. But we've reminded them that the decisions that you make socially outside of our environment are critically important. You not only put yourself at risk, but you can put others at risk. We have to think beyond that. So this is a great learning opportunity, an outstanding teaching opportunity for our student athletes. I'm confident and very, very hopeful that they will utilize this in that fashion. Will we have additional positive tests across our campus, across our country in these environments? I would say probably, but let's make sure we have the right set of protocols in place. And also let's make sure that our students, and specifically in our case, our student athletes, are following those protocols.
Thank you.
Brian Peterson, Arizona Desert Swarm, you're up next.
Dave, has the athletic department of school had any discussions about the offer of a loan from the Pac-12? And if so, would you guys be interested in taking that?
Yeah, Brian, obviously the financial implications are pretty significant here. We have had conversations with the Pac-12 about bridge funding of some level. We're exploring that. Nothing has been secured or finalized in any way, but we would entertain some type of bridge funding if and when it's available. We have to maintain some level of operation and keep our programs moving in a positive direction, so that when we do come out of this on the other end, we're in a better place to continue to vault and go forward.
Thank you.
David Kelly, KVOA, you're next.
Hey, Dave. What were your thoughts on the manifesto from the players of the Pac-12 and We Are United? And what conversations have you had with U of A players that are involved with that?
Yeah, sure, David. Thanks. The We Are United, information. Obviously, we've read that. We understand that. Number one, we're always listening to our student athletes, always. And we are, whether that's at a local level here at U of A, we have our student athletes placed in a variety of committees and work groups, but also at the Pac-12 level. We have a student athlete leadership group that has been in existence for a very long time that is part of our governance structure. We have a football specific student athlete leadership group. So conversations about these things, quickly move into those groups and are exchanged with athletic directors, with our senior women's administrators, our faculty reps. It's part of our council process. So there's always been dialogue. Specifically, I know that our conference commissioner, along with two representatives from our athletic directors, have had direct conversations with the group. And those have been, in my mind, productive and appropriate. And we continue to dialogue as we move forward. Again, there's a long list of requests, I guess I'd call them, demands, however you want to phrase it. But we address many of those. Many of what's included, or at least the genesis behind them, exist. We have medical care that is extended. We provide. Everything is about health and safety. We've done so much over the recent period of time for student athletes in growth, whether that's in cost of attendance, additional services on our campuses. So again, an abundance of services that are there. And I think we want to talk through that with the appropriate people. And we're doing that right now. So I feel like we're headed in a direction that can certainly produce results.
And just to follow up, if I could, I know that maybe this is outside of the athletic realm, but why do you think the Arizona schools are so far ahead in terms of testing than the other schools? Was testing, I guess, was that maybe not discussed by the president in a uniform way that everybody would kind of be at the same level?
Well, certainly we've been a leader here in Arizona, in the state, both campuses, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've done here at U of A. Really been active, very robust in creating testing, building structure around those testing and research. So that's been important. It's, we have outstanding institutions. Remember, each state or geographic area has a number of different impacts or critical issues that they have to deal with, from state and county health regulations, rule. There's a number of those things that are taken into consideration. I'm again across the board, and in listening to our athletic directors, hearing our medical advisory group, there has been very successful testing going on in all of our campus communities. They're not identical. If and when we move to a next step of competition, that's certainly part of this testing. One of those three reasons why the decision was made by our president, that needs to be consistent and very, very robust for the teams that are going to compete. So, hopefully that hits it a little bit there.
All right, just kind of an update here on the questions. Got a long line, just want to make sure everyone knows their order here. Next will be Rachel from the Wall Street Journal, then Jason Barr and Michael Lev to follow. So Rachel, you're next on the questions.
Okay, thanks much. Hi, Dave. You mentioned a potential $65 million hole at most without football. What's your total projected athletic department budget for the coming year?
We're projecting, our budget is I think we project about a $94 million budget.
Wow. And what kinds of things, other than the potential bridge loan from the Pac-12, are you looking at to close that in the event there is no football this whole academic year?
Yeah, we're working on those additional mitigation strategies, but as we've been highlighted before, we are part of the university's furlough program and salary reduction program. So our coaches and our staff are fully engaged in that now. We have done numerous, sport-specific budget cuts and administrative cuts. And so, we were very aggressive, I think, in those things early on. Mm-hmm. So, but we're looking at we will have to make additional reductions. Everything's on the table. That exercise is in full force right now, and we'll continue to go forward. But the little bit of the uncertainty of will we play football or not. So we need to model so that we can survive or continue. Survive's a way too strong word. Continue to move forward in small chunks. And then as we see how things develop, we will pivot and look at additional reductions, or possibly we can look at, okay, we can move forward and continue to grow.
Thanks.
Jason Barr.
Hi, Dave. Thanks so much for doing this. Why do you think that you and the Pac-12 have come to a different conclusion than, say, your predecessor and the SEC?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on other conferences and why or how they make their decisions. I will just say that our decision process was very thorough with athletic directors. Ultimately, our presidents in our conference make those decisions. They voted. We lean very heavily on the advice and the direction from our medical advisory group, as we have from the very beginning. So the decision was made with their advice and their recommendations, first and foremost. And as I have said a number of times right today, with the health and safety of our student athletes. We're responsible at each campus, and then of course from the Pac-10 level of the Pac-12 level, the Pac-12 student athletes. And so we made that decision with their health, safety, and well-being. And again, as I said, our coaches and staff as well.
But you can understand that 2 weeks ago, you also made a decision to play. And so when somebody says to me, what changed in 2 weeks, I have a difficult time answering other than your mind, which is okay, but I'm just trying to figure out what changed so much in 2 weeks from the conference only schedule to now not playing when things were going so well on your campus with the return of student athletes.
Again, Jason, I think 2 weeks is an eternity in the COVID-19 era. This is such a fluid environment. I don't think anyone on this call would argue that day to day things change, hour to hour things change. We learn, we adjust, and that's not just in college athletics. That's been everywhere. We take the information as we have it, make the very best decisions we can when we're presented with that. Yes, we were planning forward. We've always wanted to have pathways to play and to continue sport. But things pivoted and we made that decision. There was, again, I will go back to 2 weeks in my mind is a very long time in the COVID-19 era. You learn much through that period of time. And, when we wanted to schedule and lay out a plan for games, that existed, and we thought we could move forward with that. And unfortunately, that didn't happen.
To Michael Lev.
Hello again. I know you said just a bit ago that you were probably going to have to look into some additional reductions. We asked a few months ago whether it would be possible that you'd have to drop any sports. Do you anticipate having to drop any other sports as part of those reductions?
That is not on our list at this time to reduce any sports. We are looking at a number of other mitigation strategies to move through this.
Okay. You mentioned your support for spring football. Have any specific models been discussed among Pac-12 leadership, and what do you consider to be some of the pros and cons of a spring football season?
Again, just back of the napkin kind of planning right now. But we have a work group. We've had a football working group for several months now that had been planning forward, and that has been continued to be engaged, and they're working now on plans for the spring. Again, I want to hear the feedback from our coaches who are engaged on that. We have athletic directors on that as well. We have medical staff on that. So all of that information needs to be talked about, brought to the front, and then start to assemble models with justifications of how they can work.
All right, update on the next order of questions. We have Bruce Pascoe followed by Jacob with the Arizona Daily Wildcat, and then back to Justin Spears. So Bruce, you're up next.
Dave, just again, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more on what you've cut already. You mentioned you've been very aggressive with some of the cuts, but not necessarily thinking about cutting sports. So I was wondering what has been done, and what are some of these other mitigation strategies? Is it possible, for example, you might be launching some sort of fundraising push with individuals or corporations or some kind of fund or like that, in addition to cutting and maybe taking some of that loan?
Well, certainly we have appealed to our supporters to continue to contribute to our program. We have pivoted that the dollars that we have in our fundraising efforts will be going to student athlete services, and supporting their times on campus, not into capital projects. So we postponed all capital projects. We initiated a 10% budget cut for all sport programs, a 15% cut for all administrative programs. We did a hiring freeze at that time. We also have a freeze on any new positions to come back that are not related directly to coaching or student athlete development. So we're being very, again, intentional about the staffing size that we have. So along with a relatively robust furlough and salary reduction program. Now, with that said, now we're going back to look at larger buckets, areas that we would reduce. We obviously need to evaluate the savings that we've incurred as a result of limited travel, no recruiting, some of the expense items that we can recoup to a degree. And so we work both sides of that to keep us, moving forward.
Is there a possibility down the road that you'd actually have to do layoffs with some of your staffers or shrink coaching staffs or anything like that, or turn some coaches to part-time, that kind of thing?
Again, all being evaluated, what type of staffing level we would have. And, those are very challenging, conversations and discussions to have. But again, we want to focus. Our bullseye is the student athletes and the services that provided. We will have and we will continue to train and be ready and move forward. We will continue to support them academically, medically, mental health wise, all of those wraparound services. So we've got to stay focused on that. And we don't want to harm that for as long as we possibly can. And we think we can put strategies together that will allow us to do that.
Okay. If I could ask you one more kind of weeds question about the finances. I noticed when you booked media rights, 85% of it is assigned to football. Is that in the contract? And if there's does that mean if there's no football, you only get 15% of the money from the TV, or is that sort of like an industry standard where you just sort of assign that percentage to football?
Bruce, I'd have to look exactly at the report and have it in front of me, but I mean, I think it's a reporting strategy. I think we begin to estimate revenues and build revenues centered around football and then report that way. So I don't know what all the smaller buckets that add up to that larger bucket are, but it's I don't use that as a hard number that it's a zero, that is football, and if football goes away, all of it goes away. I don't know exactly what makes it all up.
Yeah, and that's what I was just wondering. When you had that in the media right deal with Fox and ESPN, does it say, is it broken down by football, basketball, or, because you might have all basketball, but you might have no football, or you might only have 5-6 games in football.
Right.
Is that specified, or is it just a wide open negotiation here, figuring this out?
It's generally one large media rights package that encompasses football and basketball and all of the other rights that we have.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, you're next.
Hi, Dave. Aside from obviously if there's going to be a football season in the spring, what do you feel is the biggest unknown right now?
Good question, Jacob. I guess the biggest unknown is, what plan should we make? And so we have to make multiple plans. And that's very challenging on our staff and our teams and our student athletes. So I think the uncertainty, just that unknown is the real big challenge that we have. And, you just go day to day, stay focused on our bullseye of our student athletes, their best interests, and continue to move forward.
Back to Justin Spears, Arizona Daily Star.
Dave, in these discussions, was it ever brought up the possibility of changing course and maybe returning in the fall, or is this a concrete decision?
I mean, the overall.
Yeah, like let's say the states where Pac-12 schools are in is doing better with COVID-19, and maybe SEC and other conferences are doing okay with football. Would you guys possibly make a decision to change course and maybe start fall sports back up again?
I would think there'd have to be some very dramatic pivots. We have to. We're very committed to moving to January for all of those competitions. But if something incredible happened, we've got to be fluid and we've got to be flexible. Back to maybe Jason's, comment. Things do change very quickly. So I would never take anything off the table. I would never say we wouldn't consider something. But I do think it would be hard to pivot, for instance, college football that quickly to get back, if we didn't know something very, very rapidly, which that was part of the decision making. We just don't think we would have that enough information and enough to comfort ourselves with testing and understanding the virus and the cardiovascular issues, the cardiac issues.
Looks like we're to Alec White with the Arizona Daily Star.
Hey, Dave. Good to hear from you. I'm curious as to why the decision was made for all fall sports, because some of the smaller sports such as cross country or golf could theoretically take place with social distancing measures across the conference. What was the decision to do all sports as opposed to maybe just football? Why were the smaller sports also included?
Again, I think we take in consideration all of our student athletes. While I think you could interpret different sports in different manners. We certainly understand that golf isn't like football, but in the best interest of all of our student athletes, our presidents ultimately felt that it was wise to just pause. You're talking about all of this, not just one sport. How do we put our student athletes in the best position possible? Some of these are non-championship seasons for them, so we can reduce those competitive environments and then still have a full season in the winter, spring for those sports as well.
Back to Bruce Pascoe.
Dave, there were some statements from ADs and coaches around the conference that maybe basketball was considered sort of a secondary thing, and I think there were some indications that it was even a surprise that basketball was told January 1, whereas there was a thought that it would be delayed, but maybe not that far. And I'm wondering what your reaction to that was, and is that a concern, especially if the NCAA ends up setting up games and bubbles in November and December?
Well, again, all of those, those scenarios were discussed. Again, the decision-making moved very, very rapidly. There's no question about that. But I think our basketball coaches understand that. We're, again, trying to develop that around how we will start in January. I think we quickly understand and we all support making sure that our student athletes are in the best possible position to stay healthy. And so it's really about looking at that into January now. So I feel that our coaches understand that. They understand the decision by the presidents, and we can plan forward with that. Again, lots of unknowns still out there on how this will materialize going forward. I'm very hopeful that we can continue to have some non-conference games going forward, in January, and develop a season that works for everyone, because I think that'd be in the best interest of college basketball.
Well, I'm wondering, they're making the argument that actually over winter break is the best time to have a bubble because they're not going to be on campus anyway. They're either going to, or in early December, everyone's going to be off campus and finishing up remotely. So the argument they're making is, and I think Dan Gavitt spoke to this, that's a good opportunity to get players in a bubble and maybe have some regional non-conference games in December, say, for example. Do you think that if that is structured in such a way that appears to be safe and a good idea, that the Pac-12 might back up and let basketball teams participate in something like that?
Again, I think we're pretty convinced that we're moving towards January. But back to Justin's question, I'm not a person that would not consider something. So could something change that allows us to consider it? Okay, I don't see that. But if there is an abundance of evidence, and our medical advisory group was entertaining that, we could have that conversation. But I don't see us working on that immediately. Bubbling has become obviously the buzzword and the hot term. Or can we isolate in certain periods of times and pods? I think there's ways to do that. I think we may even have to do some of that as we go into a winter and spring season anyways.
I was wondering if you've had any conversations with Sean or Adia about that specifically. It seems like basketball, because of what the NBA and WNBA have done, that bubbling seems to be maybe a little bit more manageable for basketball. So I didn't know if you guys have talked about that and at least thrown around, hey, maybe this could work for us too.
I've had absolutely had conversations with Sean and Adia about it and about the basketball situations, so that we're on the same page. Yeah, the NBA and the WNBA have shown a pathway, but again, we've got to get back to, are we comfortable and ready to do the right kind of testing, even if we're in bubble environments, and are we comfortable with all of the potential ramifications of COVID-19, and can we handle those? So again, until we have certainty on those things, or a better comfort level on those, I think we were going to be very, very cautious.
Yeah. How about just the logistics of it in general? I mean, granted, students are either going to be on break or maybe studying remote, but would you guys be okay, and would the coaches be okay with maybe locking them up at the Park MGM and playing games at T-Mobile for 2 weeks or whatever? I mean, or 3 weeks. Is that even a thing that you could see college students doing, and as long as everyone's going to be remote anyway? Or do you think it's maybe trickier with college athletes than it is for the pros?
Well, it's certainly different than the pros, who have a full enterprise that they can, in a way, dictate how they're going to operate. So we have to be careful with that. But I think there are ways that you could do this in small isolation pods that might make some sense. But it's not as easy as just saying we're going to shutter, everybody goes online and just do it. I think there's a lot of considerations on that. These are still student athletes, but I am open to looking at, in small periods, of could you do some isolation or do some small podding. And again, like I said, I believe we might have to look at that as we move on into the winter and spring anyways.
Okay. Thanks.
John with KOLD, I saw your hand was up next.
Yeah, I had it up and then I took it down because Bruce's question basically covered what I was going to ask. But I do have another one. We're curious if we'd like to know the reaction to the Oregon State president's comment on what the Pac-12 sees that the SEC does not. His response was, I think, probably reality. So what is your reaction to that comment?
Well, again, as I said earlier, I'm not going to comment on the decision-making process of any of my colleagues or different conferences. We're focused on the Pac-12 conference, making the right decisions under the circumstances that are presented with us, the conditions in our states and regions of our institutions, and with the health and safety of our student athletes first and foremost.
And then moving back to Brian Peterson.
Two things, Dave. Has there been any consideration of naming rights for the football or basketball facilities as a way to bring in some revenue? And then secondly, when it comes to coaching salaries, is there anything in a process where if a season doesn't happen, that there's something in the language that would mean that you could allow for a larger reduction or even an elimination because if a coach didn't coach, they don't need to get paid? I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, some of those specific contractual language issues and what opportunities or options are there are being reviewed by legal counsel and the appropriate human resources individuals to see where we are. So I don't really have an answer for that. That's not where we're focused on right now. For sure, we're looking at how we can continue to coach and do that. Let's see. What was the other part of that, Brian?
Naming rights for football and basketball stadiums?
No, we haven't advanced that in any way at this point.
Thank you.
Last hand up I see so far is with Steve Rivera.
Just real quick, maybe an off the course question. We've all worked remotely here for 4 or 5 months. Any thoughts on returning to McHale as kids come back and probably need stuff at McHale and the traffic is maybe back to normal with you guys?
Yeah, we still have again, we have a reentry plan, and those individuals that specifically are servicing programs and student athletes. So you'll start to see a little more activity, but it's very specific as to, servicing programs and student athletes. a majority of our staff will continue to work remotely. And we've done that. I've done that virtually from the beginning. We will have some small pockets now where people will enter the office. Again, we have a number of protocols and procedures and limited hours. And again, very, very small number of people accessing their offices.
Thank you.
Almost out of time here with Dave, so I got time for one more question. And Michael, you had the race to get it up first.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned, Dave, that you addressed each of the teams that was affected by this decision. I'm wondering, what was the reaction that you sensed or got from players, and what kind of feedback have you gotten from parents about the overall decision to shutter fall sports?
Yeah, again, we certainly haven't canceled it. We've paused it and delayed it. We think there's a lot of opportunity that presents to go forward. But again, difficult discussions. This day and age, you never break the information anymore. Most of them had a little bit of time to digest it because of the way news spreads now so quickly and their social media connections and such. But yeah, there's certainly disappointment. Our student athletes want to play. They want to participate. They want structure. They want to. That's what they do. It's part of their day. So there was disappointment, but I think at the same time there was a level of comfort that we were really thoughtful, and we were aware of their health and safety, their best interests, first and foremost. And so we've got to work through the issues. We've got to work through eligibility issues, compliance issues, how we would train, how we would do that. But, our goal here is to create at Arizona the best, high-end training center for the next several months. We're gonna pivot to almost like an Olympic model, and highly energized, highly engaged, really to just focus in on some things. Focus in on your physical well-being and your training and your sport, but focus in on your mental well-being and what can we do motivationally? How can we provide an environment for our student athletes to really excel, and then also give them ample opportunity? Maybe we can step back just a little bit, really thoughtfully go through how they, proceed academically too. So, but definitely a highly engaged environment. Nobody's just going to stay home in their apartment and not do anything. I think we've got a model that can be highly successful going forward. But, from a parent side, lots of positives. Again, I'm a parent of a student athlete. I'm disappointed that someone can't play. I am. I also have to be sure that I want my son to be in a good place. As hard as that is, I want my son to be in a good place so that something tragic doesn't happen. And we can talk about risk factors and all that, but one is too many. And, I think boils down to, I don't ever want one to happen. And so I think again, I feel very comforted, and I feel secure in our decision, and I look forward to moving forward.
Alrighty, well, we're a little over your time, Dave, so I apologize for holding it a couple extra minutes long, but thank you very much for your time, and thank you for everyone here who tuned in and joined in our media availability.
No, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. It's always good to be with this group. I really do appreciate it. So I'll hang in there. We'll have a story. We'll have a new story tomorrow, right? We'll all be able to do something new tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.